Good evening. How's everybody doing? I'm sorry that we're a little bit late today. Usually I try to go at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Today we're about an hour later than that. It's close to 7. But I go every day. So stuff comes up in my life. I can't always make the exact schedule. How's everybody doing? Who is with us? Stephen Giguere says shalom from Dover, New Hampshire. Joyce Noach says shalom from Amsterdam. Great to see you in the house, Joyce. James Roth, shalom from Indianapolis. Pauline Michael, shalom from Arkansas. Melissa Itel Jurin, good evening from Great Neck, New York. J.C. Powell, a newish name from Virginia. Bill Aldridge in the house from Berkeley at the Graduate Theological Union. Right, Bill? Christine, shalom from North Carolina. Paula Schmidt-Klauser from Chicago says shalom. Mark Lister says hello. He's in Portland, Oregon. Zahayan Zahid says hello from Bangladesh. Welcome, Zahayan. Mark says, hey. Edberg says, in the house from Galloway, New Jersey. Sue Strauss in the house. I never get tired of saying that. From Chicago. Bill says, hey, time gets away from us. It happens. Amanda Lewis from California. And Neil from Virginia says, shalom, Rav Sal. Maybe Reb Sal. Rav Sal is too much for me. Okay, it's great to be with you all. Let's get into it. A couple more. Handone Bizamat from Manhattan, New York. Kimberly Keller from Southern Maryland. And Mark also from Maryland. All right, let's get into it. We've got a lot to cover in this daf. This is a busy and beautiful page of the Talmud. We are holding on daf Kuf Yud Zion, page 117. We're in chapter 16. We'll wrap up our discussion of Mishnah number 2 and open a discussion of Mishnah number 3. Let's light up the darkness. All right. So much good stuff on this daf. And the section that we're heading into, spectacular, these next four pages. Okay. We have been comparing two seemingly unrelated ideas, unrelated sort of sets of laws, or unrelated laws, let's say. So one idea, one law is we may save holy writings from a fire on Shabbos. And now that we're saving the holy writing, a Torah scroll or a scroll from the writings of the Bible or from the prophets of the Bible, obviously from the Torah, really any holy writings, and especially in modern times, any sort of holy Jewish books, a Jew may save from a fire on Shabbos. Once you're saving the scroll, right? Books these days, okay, it's a book, you take the book. But when you're talking about a scroll, a Torah scroll, or even like a Megillah, which is on a single dowel, very often such a scroll has a casing, right? It has a wrapping around it, sometimes a very elaborate and beautiful casing. So once you're saving the scroll, of course you can take the casing with it. And once you're taking the scroll and its cover, if there happened to be something in that cover along with the scroll, which we ordinarily would not touch or move on Shabbos, now it can go along for the ride. And so the example that's given is money. Money is muktzah on Shabbos, meaning it is not prepared for use on Shabbos. It has no legitimate use on Shabbos. We don't deal with money. We don't touch money on Shabbos. But if money happens to be in that casing along with the scroll, we can take it outside with us. Now, that idea is being related to something that seems totally unrelated. The fact that the Korban Pesach, this is in English, we could say the Paschal lamb or the Paschal kid, meaning the lamb or the young goat that we're going to bring as an offering for Passover. Now, the Passover offering, unlike other offerings, it doesn't go up complete. It's not consumed on the altar like some offerings. It's not given on the altar, and some of the food is given so that the priests can eat it. Rather, a small part of it, I think, just blood is sprinkled and the fats are burned on the altar, but the rest of the meat of the korban, of the Passover offering, is eaten by the group of people who have registered to eat on that animal. You have to prepare for Passover. Obviously, this is Passover in ancient times when the temple stood. So people would make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem if it was possible for them. They would go up to Jerusalem. They would bring the Korban Pesach. And if Passover fell out on a Sunday, meaning that the Seder was Saturday night after Shabbos ended, but the animal itself had to be slaughtered, and the parts that were going to be used in the temple, that has to happen during the day before the Seder, right? The day of the 14th of Nisan. So if that's happening during Shabbos, we've already learned that we do not do anything. We don't prepare food. We don't fold clothes. We don't do anything on Shabbos that is going to be for after Shabbos. This is an exception. We do slaughter the Korban Pesach. We do slaughter the Pesach, right? We slaughter the animal that we're going to eat Saturday night on Saturday if Passover happens to fall out that way. We will slaughter it on Saturday, and once we slaughter it, we have to do another one of the forbidden labors. So one of the specific 39 prohibited labors of Shabbos is skinning an animal, right? Because we take the hides off the animal. They were used in the construction of the tabernacle. So the question that was raised was, well, we need the animal in order to eat it. We need its meat. We don't need its skin. The skin of the Korban Pesach, it's like a little bonus, right? Maybe you're going to do something with that skin. I mean, a skin of an animal is useful, of a goat or of a lamb. It's a useful object. You could make a bag out of it. You could make all kinds of stuff out of its skin. So it's sort of like a side benefit of slaughtering the Paschal offering that you're going to eat that night, that you get the skin. But skinning is something that's not allowed to be done on Shabbos. It's specifically prohibited, biblically prohibited. So if what we need is the meat, we're going to have to take some of the skin off the animal, but we don't have to take all of the skin off the animal in order to get at the meat that we can eat, and even to get at the fats that are going to be burned on the Mizbeach, on the altar. We wouldn't have to remove all of the skin. In fact, in this discussion, it's proposed maybe you stop skinning, or if you must take all of the skin off, take it off in strips where you're not going to have the benefit of having a nice whole hide after you've done the flaying, but that's okay because what you needed was the meat. Why should you get this bonus skin, the hide of an animal, when in order to get it, you have to do a skinning on Shabbos? And the answer is we can skin the animal. It's a labor not for its own sake, right? What we need is the meat of the animal so that we can roast it after Shabbos and eat it after our Seder during the festive meal, right? We read the Haggadah, we have the festive meal, and then we would eat that animal. These days, by the way, where there is no temple and we don't bring the Pesach, the vast majority of Jewish communities will not eat a roast lamb or a roast goat the way that we did in the old days. And that's a sign of mourning for the loss of the temple, the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago. But when the temple stood, what we needed was the meat. But now that we're getting the meat, we can just take off the skin in the same way that when we're saving a Torah from a fire, we can take its casing with us, and if there happened to be money in there, it goes along for the ride. What we could not do is put money into the casing so that it would be saved. That would be an artifice, right? An artificiality that's not real. If the money happened to be in there, you could carry it along. Just like the skin comes along with the animal, and so you can keep it, but it's not like you can go skin some other animal that you're not going to eat its meat that night at the Seder. And that's basically how those two laws are related. Okay, And just to be clear, this is not a case of cut off its head. Cut off its head means, that even Rabbi Shimon would agree that if you want to, do something that's permitted on Shabbos, but it will necessarily cause something that's prohibited on Shabbos to happen, right? The case that we always give, if you're going to drag a bench over a dirt floor, the furrow that's created it's illegal to make a furrow in the dirt. That's like plowing. That's something that's prohibited to do on Shabbos. If it's just ancillary to moving a bench, which is permitted, and you want to move a bench so more people can sit at your Shabbos table, so it's permitted according to Rabbi Shimon, even though it might create the furrow. But if it must create a furrow in the dirt floor, then you would be prohibited under this principle of if we cut off its head, will it not die? In other words, a person can't say, all I needed was to cut off the head of that bug. I didn't mean to kill it. But if you cut the head of something off, for sure it's going to die. It's inevitable. And likewise, even Rabbi Shimon will agree that if you do something that's permitted on Shabbos, but it will inevitably cause something prohibited to happen, then we don't permit that otherwise permitted thing. But the case of the Korban Pesach is not in that category. Why? Because it's not just permitted to slaughter an animal and take off its skin so that you have the meat to eat that night at Passover. It is obligated. It is an obligation, and that mitzvah, that obligation, overrides Shabbos. We don't think to ourselves, I'm doing a mitzvah so I can override Shabbos. You need a specific instruction like we get from our sages. And in fact, even in old times when the temple stood, there was a lot of debate about this. And there's a story told that when the great sage Hillel from the late Second Temple period came to Israel from Babylonia, from the Jewish community in Bavel. Where is Bavel, by the way? Where is Babylonia? Like the area that most of the Jewish communities were in is like between the Tigris and Euphrates River, sort of between Iraq, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. That was the Babylonian community, and there was a Jewish community there. When Hillel came from there to Jerusalem, it is told that he arrived during a Shabbos, or I guess maybe he probably came the day before, but it was one that, he arrived in that holiday period when Passover fell on Sunday, and people were arguing with each other whether they could. You'd think they would have figured this out. It's already going on for 1,000 years, but it doesn't always fall out that way, and people argued whether they could slaughter those offerings and take the skin, and these questions that we're arguing about. And it was Hillel who said, yes, you do it, you override Shabbos so that you're ready for Passover. Okay, that's that discussion. Now we move on. So we've established that if there's a fire that breaks out on Shabbos in a building, that we're going to rescue holy writings from that fire. Got it. We agree with that. Where are we going to put them? How far can you take this rescue? It's Shabbos, so the principle is generally going to be that if for some reason you have a situation where the sages have said you can override a Shabbos prohibition, in this case to save holy writings, we're going to violate Shabbos the minimum amount. We are going to violate the minimum amount. It was okay to bring the case with the money in it. It was okay to flay the animal and keep the skin. But now that we're carrying the holy writings out of the house, how far do we have to go? Really, only so that they're going to get out of the way of the fire. And what we cannot do is carry them out into the public domain. Now, to understand what comes next, you got to understand two things. One is the general sort of dwelling situation that most people, average people, lived in during Talmudic times. It was like they basically lived in small, like small houses or small apartment buildings. Maybe there was an upstairs and a downstairs, but it was more like, single or two family houses, and several of these homes would open onto a courtyard. Think of a cul-de-sac, right? So a couple of homes around a communal courtyard. And think of it, it's like a development. And so there was a bunch of these courtyards, in a row, and the courtyards would open into an alley, right? And then it was the alley that would go out to the main road. The main road is the public domain. The courtyards outside the family homes is very easy to make those a communal courtyard. You know, all they would have to do is like put a piece of bread out there to create a certain kind of eruv, and then they would agree that they're all sharing that courtyard. In many cases, it was understood that it's a shared courtyard, and so that's definitely the private domain. What about the alley? Several courtyards open onto an alley, and then the alley leads down to the main road. Is the alley a private domain or a public domain? So the answer is the alley is going to be a public domain, and so you couldn't take the Torah that you're saving from the fire, I mean, unless there's no choice, right? Then they're going to be lenient-ish. But to sort of safeguard against, God forbid, the day when one of these homes might be burning and you need to rescue some things, and even because you want to be able to go on Shabbos and maybe take some food with you to your neighbor's house who's in the neighboring courtyard, and you want to be able to carry through that alley, it was already going to be set up. How? What is it that they're doing in the alley to make it a private domain rather than a public domain? And the answer is there was a disagreement among the sages of what was necessary. Rabbi Eliezer held that at the end of the alley, so let's imagine that this alley has a bunch of courtyards opening onto it. One end of the alley is a wall, okay, so it's like a dead end. The other end of the alley is the main road, right? So a few courtyards open into the alley. It's a dead end on one end, and the opening on the other end goes out to the main road. At the opening, you're going to do something which is going to symbolize that this whole alley is going to be jointly used, almost jointly owned. It's going to be done by a symbol. It's going to be done symbolically by all the courtyards that open onto it. And you're going to do that depending on which opinion, and there's going to be three opinions. You're going to use it some combination of a post and a beam. A post and a beam. So if you can look at this illustration here. Whoop. So right there, it's a little out of focus, I apologize. But that's the opening of the alley. And so you see there's a beam across the top, and there are posts on either side that make the alley a little bit narrower. The beam across the top and the posts on either side of the opening to the alley. Okay. Rabbi Eliezer says you need the two posts, one post on each side of the opening to the alley. The Academy of Shammai, the students of Beis Shammai, say you need a post and a beam, at least one post and a beam. And the students of Hillel, the Academy of Hillel, in other words, Beis Hillel, the house of Hillel, says either a post or a beam. And the law follows Hillel. So to create an eruv, what we're creating here is an eruv, a communal area where it's going to be permitted to carry in that alley, all you need is either a post standing at least 10 handbreadths high, and it can be made out of any material, or a beam across the top. And these are the constituent parts of any eruv. So we've talked a lot about the eruv because it's so important, and we're going to keep talking about it. And when the next tractate of the Talmud after Shabbos is eruvin, so we're going to get into the technicalities of the eruv in much greater depth. But you may have heard, or you may be familiar, that in many cities and in many communities, there is a communal eruv. Los Angeles happens to have the largest eruv in the world. It's like 30 square miles of area contained. And so when the eruv is valid, meaning it's been checked, so we can carry on Shabbos, I can carry a prayer book, I could carry a talis bag, etc. We can carry things, and it's very important for people with young children that they can carry the kids, or they can even use a stroller, which would not be permitted in the absence of the eruv. What is the eruv? It's a combination of post and beam. Posts and beams. The beam does not have to be a heavy piece of wood across the opening of an alley. In fact, it can be the lightest possible version of a beam. It just has to be something which crosses across the top. And what's normally used is wire or fishing line. And the posts, it's so interesting. I did a little bit of research about this today. We're not going to digress too much on this. But very often what's used is, utility poles, light poles, electric wire poles, etc. But you don't just use the post that's already there. You have to create the eruv. And so what they will actually do is take like a rubber hose, usually a black rubber hose, that they staple to the utility pole, and it looks just like, the kind of black hosing or the black, wire covering that covers actual wires used by the electric company. You'll know it's for the purpose of an eruv if the top of this, sort of thick wire or sort of black hose, like a garden hose, sort of like the width of a garden hose, usually black, at the top of it, they have like a rubber stopper, the kind you would find on the bottom of a folding metal chair. That kind of rubber stopper on top of that sort of black hose, and this whole hose is stapled to the utility pole. That hose, that rubber hose, acts as the symbolic post, and then it goes up near the wire, and then the wire surrounds that whole area that the eruv is in. Okay, for today's discussion, what we're saying is you can save these holy writings on Shabbos, and you can carry them into what's called a mavoy, an alley, and it has to be a closed alley. And what makes it closed is that it has these elements of the eruv, right? At the opening of the alley, and it could have two openings, but then you have to put these structures at both openings. You need to have either a post or a beam, either a post at the side or a beam across the top. That's enough for an alley. When we're creating a bigger communal eruv, you need posts and beams continuous all the way around the area enclosed by the eruv. Okay. As we're going to see, if the Torah is being carried there, they're going to be lenient. Even according to Rabbi Eliezer, who says you need to have two posts at either opening of the alley to carry a Torah, to save holy writings, even he would say one post is enough. So they're going to be more lenient for holy writings. But now we're going to talk about the next category of stuff that you can save from a fire. Okay. This is Mishnah number 3 of chapter 16. I'm going to read it to you. One may rescue food for 3 meals from a fire on Shabbat. One may rescue food that is suitable for a person, and one may rescue food that is suitable for an animal, right? You can take animal food and you could take people food. You could take both. How so? If a fire ignited on Friday night before the Shabbat evening meal, one may rescue food for 3 meals. You can rescue enough food for the Friday night dinner, for the Saturday lunch, for the Saturday afternoon meal, at least for 3 meals. If a fire ignited in the morning of Saturday morning, and you've already had the Shabbat evening meal, the Friday night meal, so now you can save enough food from the fire for the 2 meals, for lunch and the afternoon meal. If the fire ignited in the afternoon after lunch, you can save just enough for the 1 meal that's remaining of Shabbos. Rabbi Yosei says, one may always rescue food for 3 meals, which is the measure that the sages permitted without distinguishing between the times of the day. But in fact, the halakha, one may rescue sufficient food from a fire for the meals that one must eat on Shabbos. At night, prior to the first meal, you can rescue enough for 3 meals. So the law is not like Rabbi Yosei. The halakha is enough food for the meals which remain, depending on when the fire breaks out. Now, the first question that the Gemara asks is, so you're saying you can rescue food because there's a fire. Okay, food is not muktzah. Food is permitted for use on Shabbos. Obviously, you can eat food, you can move food, you could take food from one place to another. Now we're saying you can rescue food from a fire. why, if you're already rescuing some food, why are we going to put any limitations on it? Why, now that you're taking food, take as much food as you can grab. Okay, we're making this special category of food and distinguishing it maybe from other household objects. We're going to talk about those at another time. But once you're grabbing food, why are we putting some kind of a limitation on it? Why not just get as much stuff as it's permitted to move, right? Anything that's not muktzah, why can't you just grab it and take it out? And the answer that's given, Rava said, since a person is agitated about his property, if you permit him to move more stuff, he will come to extinguish the fire. Right? So here the sages are dealing with human nature. If you say to a person, okay, you can't put out the fire because it's Shabbos, you can't extinguish a fire, so you can rescue food enough for your Shabbos meals because you need it for Shabbos. So at that point, why not rescue anything that is permitted to be moved on Shabbos? And the answer is the person is freaking out. The fire is coming. He's going to try and grab everything that it's possible to grab. Now, because he's grabbing this and he's going in, he's grabbing again, he's going in, he's grabbing again, the fire is getting closer to his stuff. He might just stamp out some of the fire that's getting close to some of the stuff that he's trying to grab. They're saying you can't put out the fire on Shabbos. It's such a hard law. It's so difficult to grapple with this whole body of law. I'm sure there's going to be comments and questions about this. I'll get to them at the end of the class. But you can't put out the fire. And the sages are saying because you're going to drive yourself crazy trying to figure out what to choose and what to bring out, all you can get is the food that you need for this Shabbos now. Not for some other Shabbos, not for some other place, not other stuff, just the food that you need for the rest of this Shabbos. Now, once you're grabbing food for this Shabbos, what they haven't said is, well, food for how many people? Presumably, food for the people in your household, right? Enough food for the people who are going to be eating those meals, those Shabbos meals. Well, what if you had company coming? If you had company coming, you need more food. So you can grab more of this stuff and save it from the fire. So now the question comes up, well, I don't have guests coming, but what if I did? Now that I need to save food, I want to grab as much as I can. Okay, so I'll invite somebody afterward. I'm going to need more food because I'm going to get more people to come over and eat, I guess, God forbid, while I watch my house burn down. So can I take enough for these hypothetical guests who haven't been invited yet? To help us understand whether these hypothetical guests qualify, a couple of different examples are brought down, two analogous examples on this question. If on Shabbos a barrel of liquid that is stored on the roof breaks, so maybe I have a barrel of wine up there, or I have a barrel of beer, or I have a barrel of olive oil, a barrel of something, some kind of food, a barrel of liquid, something that's edible, and it breaks on the roof. Okay, so what I cannot do is attach a vessel to the broken barrel to catch the liquid. This is a little bit odd. It's sort of hard to understand. What I can do is I can bring a large vessel and put the barrel in it. I could do that. But apparently, or put it under. I can put it under the broken barrel. That's what it says. I can put it under the broken barrel. But what I cannot do is attach this vessel to the broken barrel. So I'm going to, in other words, I'm not allowed to do the technique that's going to allow me to preserve most of the contents of the barrel. I'm going to have greater loss because I can't attach a vessel. But if guests are coming, if guests are here, if I need the liquid to feed people on Shabbos in my house, then I can attach the vessel. So the same question. I want to save the contents of this barrel. I could save, I'm allowed to save more of it if I have guests coming. I didn't already invite guests. Can I save the barrel? Can I invite guests now so I can save the barrel? And the rule here is you're not allowed to use the artifice of inviting guests in order to save the contents of the barrel. You have to have a legitimate reason for inviting people to your Shabbos table. And if they're there, if they're coming, if for sure they're coming, then you can attach the vessel to the barrel and save more of its contents. Rambam holds, Maimonides, right, holds like Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, who says you can use artifice in that situation, but the sages and the halakha say no. Different situation brought as an analogy. On Yom Tov, so it's a holiday, but not Shabbos. The difference between Yom Tov, any other holiday, and Shabbos, it's all the same restrictions, all the same labors are prohibited, except for food preparation. You're allowed to do the things you need to do in order to prepare food on Yom Tov. You can cook on Yom Tov, you can't cook on Shabbos. If there's a pit, and on Yom Tov, on the holiday, on a Jewish holiday, and you own animals, right? Most people were some kind of agricultural situation. So let's say you own animals, and a mother sheep and its offspring, its lamb, both fall into a pit, okay? If you leave them in the pit, they're going to die in the pit, and they're going to die and not have been slaughtered, so you won't be able to eat them at all if they die in the pit. Now, you bring up the mother. You rescue her. Okay, now you've got an animal that you can slaughter and cook and eat on Yom Tov. You have what you need. So you can't now also rescue the kid, right? You have an animal. But what you are allowed to do, and this is a situation where you can use this artifice, and you can say, well, I'm not sure if I want the mother. Actually, I want the lamb. I don't need a whole sheep. I want the lamb. So now you go down and you can rescue the lamb, and you can bring it up, and then you can choose which one you're going to slaughter, either the mother or the lamb, either one. So you can use this artifice of, well, I'm not sure if I need this one. I'm going to go down and rescue the other one. And that allows you to rescue both animals from the pit. Note, by the way, that there's a specific Torah commandment that you cannot slaughter a mother and its young on the same day. That's prohibited by the Torah. But you can use this artifice. And it's very similar to this kind of legal situation, legal, dodge that people do all the time. It's like, it's illegal to, take a shortcut through a gas station, right? Imagine you're going to make a right turn, and there's a bunch of cars at a red light, and you might not get through the red light to make your right turn, but there's a gas station on the corner, and you could cut through the gas station. So that's actually illegal, to use the gas station just as a shortcut to cut the corner. But what is allowed is you can pull into the gas station and say, oh, you know what? I don't need gas today. Yeah, I changed my mind. I don't want to get gas here. It's too expensive. I'm going to move on. That you can do. So you can pull in, stop, and then, no, I'm not going to get gas. And then you can move on. It's effectively the same way. It's the same thing. It's kind of an artifice. But I guess what's different is that you pause and think about it for a moment. Or likewise, you can't make a U-turn by pulling into a driveway across the street and then pulling out and moving on. Like that's illegal. But if, you pull into the driveway across the street, then you're like, oh, wait a minute, I thought this was my friend's house. It's not my friend's house. I made a mistake. I'm going to pull out and go my way. That's the kind of artifice that you can use to rescue a mother and its young from a pit on Yom Tov. Okay, now that we're talking about what may be rescued on Shabbos from a fire and where we may take it, somewhat related example is given that if you put bread in an oven. Now, when we talk about bread in an oven in ancient times, we're talking about a clay oven. And it's so interesting that the way that the bread was cooked, imagine it was like pita, it's sort of like a pita bread. And they took the dough and they put it, sort of stuck it to the side of the clay oven. And then later they would use a tool to peel it off the side of the oven when it was ready. Now you needed to bake the bread and get it out of the oven before Shabbat began. That's what you need to do. But something happened and you forgot. And the bread is still in there after Shabbat began. So if you need the bread, you have no other food to eat on Shabbos. You have no other food to eat on Shabbos. Same principle with the mother and its young. You need it for Yom Tov here. You need the bread for Shabbos. So now you can reach in and rescue the bread from the oven. You don't want to peel it away in the typical way that bread would be peeled away. You want to use a different utensil, like just a fork or a knife, if it's safe to do so. And so peel it away in an atypical manner so that you're not cooking on Shabbos. It was a mistake. You didn't mean to do it. You're not still cooking the bread. You're rescuing it from the oven where it'll just get burnt if you leave it there. But you can only take as much as you need for your meal. And other people could take a piece of bread that they need for their meal. How much bread do you need for Shabbos? And here, and I'm sorry it's at the end of our class today, but that's where it fell out on this daf because it's so important. We all know, or most people know, that if you've ever been to a Shabbos dinner, there's going to be 2 challahs there, right? You have 2 challahs. You need to have 2 challahs. Why 2 challahs? Because when we were the children of Israel wandering in the desert after leaving Egypt, we would get a double portion of manna on Friday that would last us through Saturday. And this is symbolized by the 2 challahs on our Shabbos table on Friday night. And then what do you do with them? You pick up both challahs when it's time to make the blessing, to recite the blessing called the motzi. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who brings forth bread from the ground. When you make the motzi, when you make the blessing on the bread, you hold both challahs in your hand. Why do we do that? Because we learn it from Rav Kahana. Rav Ashi testified, I saw Rav Kahana at his Shabbos table take the 2 loaves of bread, the 2 challahs, on Friday night. He put them both in his hands. He made the blessing, and then he broke one of them and ate from it, and that's what we ate from. And that is what we do today. That's the mitzvah of having challah on Friday nights, and we learn it from Rav Kahana, as witnessed by Rav Ashi, and it's on this page, Daf Kuf Yud Zayin of Tractate Shabbos. Here's your home address for one of the most prevalent customs in the Jewish world, to have 2 challahs on Friday night, say the blessing over both of them, and then you break one of them to eat. How much bread do you break off the challah when it's time to eat the bread? We learn from Rabbi Zeira that you break off enough bread so that if you only ate bread, you would have enough for a meal. Right? Now we make slices, but the right thing to do is to slice up enough bread that everybody could eat who's sitting at the table, right? So if you have a full table, that first loaf should be a generous loaf, and you cut the whole loaf up. If you got like 4 people, at least cut up half the loaf. But the idea is that per Rabbi Zeira, you break off enough that you could eat, and be satisfied. And that's what I've got for us today. Let me check your comments and questions. Okay, Sharon Frant Brooks says, would an Orthodox Jew consider a Reform prayer book heretical? Okay, so here we're talking about yesterday's topic, where we were talking about saving the books of heretics, and the answer is no, we don't save the books of heretics. Would an Orthodox Jew consider a Reform prayer book heretical? This is not really my area of expertise, okay? It's not my area of expertise. I don't know what's in the Reform prayer book. If there was something in there that was considered heretical to Judaism, that would be certainly problematic. But I don't know what's in the Reform prayer book, and I don't know, what the halacha is these days and how that's looked at. So I can't answer the question. Christo Cheney, sorry I'm late today. Burying my biological father tomorrow morning. Oh, Christo. Baruch Dayan Emet, blessed is the true judge. I say that because I've just heard about a death. I'm so sorry for your loss, and may your father's memory always be for a blessing. John Shore says, Miami Beach has an eruv around the entire city. there's a phone number to call before Shabbos to see if it's intact. It is inspected every Friday by rabbis. Exactly. And that's like the LA eruv. Also, there's a website. You could check it out, laeruv.org, I'm pretty sure, laeruv.org. And it tells you, like today I looked at it, the eruv is unchecked. But by Friday, it'll be checked, and hopefully it's intact, and then people will know that they can carry within the eruv. Christine, what if you have a family of 5? Is 3 meals of food enough to feed 5 times 3, 15 meals? Well, yeah, that's the idea. You could take, if the fire, God forbid, broke out before dinner on Friday, you could take out food to feed 15 people meals, right? So to feed 5 people, 3 meals. That's what you could do, exactly. And Lynn over on YouTube says, the rescued Shabbos food has to be set on something. Dishes, linen, table. Can the Shabbos table be moved outside from the fire? I don't know. It's such a good question, Lynn. I mean, we already saw that we can move the case of the Torah because essentially the case of the Torah, the covering of the Torah, acts as the base for the permitted object, which is the Torah. So, I mean, you certainly can take the bowls, right, that the food rests on. I don't know, but I doubt you can take the table. I kind of doubt you can take the whole table. I could be wrong. I'm not sure. Excellent question. Excellent question. And what about the second meal in the morning, says Alejandro Martinez. Do we have 2 challahs there? Why 2 in this case? I'm not sure what everybody does. I mean, you definitely have 2 challahs. You do have 2 challahs on your table on Shabbos, right? So the lunch table on Shabbos, you have 2 challahs, yes. And what a lot of people will do is that, like, the mom will bake 2 challahs, right? 2 homemade challahs. Now, we ate one of them Friday night. If there weren't so many people that we didn't have to get into the second challah, so like we have a whole beautiful home-baked challah from Friday night, and now on the Shabbos table on Saturday lunch, we need 2 challahs for the blessing to make the motzi. And so what we'll often have is what's called what is it called again? The motzi challah. It has a better name than that. But it's sort of like a smaller challah that you get from the store, where you're not really relying on it to feed everybody. It's there to be the second challah. Some people will take a sheet of matzah for the same purpose, so that you've got 2 loaves, like a square piece of matzah, or if you have shmura matzah, a whole round piece of matzah, that counts as a loaf, right? So you could have your home-baked challah and your sheet of matzah, and then that would count as the 2 loaves that you could use on Saturday. Okay, that's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll be on time tomorrow at 6 p.m. Pacific. Sending you all big love from the Kiddush challah. Nina just told me it's called the Kiddush challah. That's sort of smaller, usually store-bought symbolic challah, which you'll use as the second loaf on the Shabbos table for lunch. That's what I've got. All the best, my holy sisters and brothers.